Yeah, I got off the plane in Afghanistan. I didn't have any ammo. I've never fired my weapon. Like,
What? Really?
yeah.
What's up, guys? I'm so excited to share my conversation with my cousin, Patrick O'Keefe. And we grew up in a really military-focused family, and he continued the family tradition. Me, not so much, but he has been serving in the Army for over 8 years now, and he's done 2 deployments. But before his career in the military began, he was a multi-sport athlete, and sports were a huge part of his life all the way up until college. So in this episode, we talk all about our crazy injury stories and then his transition from the athlete life to being in the military and how he was thrown into some really challenging times pretty quickly with very little preparation. So there's a lot we could take away from this. But before we get to our conversation, enjoy a little behind the scenes look, or listen, at some classic O'Keefe's shitting on each other as we attempt to dabble in this podcast technology. All right, guys, enjoy. Are you about to hop on some Call of Duty?
I haven't used this headset in like years.
You look like you're either taking customer service calls or to hop on Twitch.
Dude, it's both at the same time. This is the first time I've ever used voice memos, so.
I know the past couple people I've asked do this, they didn't even know what it was. I'm like, I have like 45 voice memos of me like thinking a joke is funny and wanting to remember it later. Like, this is not funny. Why did I record?
Hey, wait, listen to this joke I told myself.
It's so sad because that is literally what I've used it for. Wait, I forget the punchline. Oh, wow, I'm funny.
Thank God I had this voice memo.
They're all labeled voice memo number 37. I'm like,
Megan's log.
if I die and anyone finds this, I'll be glad I'm dead because it's embarrassing.
Please delete.
Yeah. All right, so it's your day off, but how has COVID looked for you? What do you give people a little bit of a background of your job right now?
I'm at NTC, the National Training Center at Fort Irwin in California. It's in the Mojave Desert, like 2 hours east of LA. NTC is where like a lot of Army units come through here as kind of like their last big stop before deployment. And the idea is like, you know, that they go through the toughest day in the Army, or the toughest, it's 2 weeks long of actual training, that they go through like the hardest 2 weeks in the military here, right? So that it's not like in combat, you know?
How do you design such a difficult 2 weeks so that they're prepared for actual deployment?
So it's super easy, right? When you're not like super tired and you're not like being evaluated and stuff, to just sit back and be like,
oh yeah,
well, that's fucked up, right? Like, I don't know what the right answer is, but it's not that, you know?
That ain't it.
I can tell that's wrong. Basically, they just try to throw as many different pressures on people like simultaneously to help build like decision making under stress, right? Like, which is like a big thing, you know? So they'll do stuff like communications jamming, right? Like they'll jam some of their radios or some of their like computer systems, right? And force them to be like, well, now how do I communicate with my units, right? Like the unit here that plays like the bad guys is really, really good at it. They'll fly like commercial off the shelf drones to just like buzz people and like take pictures and drop little like fake grenades. So it's just all sorts of stuff where they just try to like mess with people continuously while they're trying to execute like the mission that they've been given.
Do you remember your training that when you went through that?
So funny story, I did not go through it before I did my first deployment.
How were you prepared?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. Yeah, I got off the plane in Afghanistan. I didn't have any ammo. I've never fired my weapon. Like,
What? Really?
yeah. So I mean, because it was all just a timeline thing. Like,
Yeah.
I graduated college on like May 5th in 2012, and then like at May 12th, so like a week to the day later, I started my like basic officer training to be an armor officer, and then I went straight from there to an advanced course after that. And then right from there to my unit in El Paso, and it was like November by this point, and the first flights were leaving in late December. So I went through like some kind of like quick, like they called it like individual readiness training, but it wasn't really a whole lot, right? Like it was like the lowest common denominator type stuff. And then in January, I was on a plane, and it was like, sweet. I don't know what I'm doing.
They're like, this is the actual test. You thought you
Yeah,
were going to
yeah,
be trained and prepared, but joke's
yeah.
on you. But how did you feel going to Afghanistan? Did you feel unprepared, or you were like, this is just the name of the game? I have to do what I have to do?
No, so I was like young and stupid, right? Like one of those things may still be true, but I mean, I was just like excited to go,
Mm.
like I was ready to go because, we like grew up where like 9/11 was like the defining moment of our lives, and so, I felt like lucky and excited and stuff to be able to go and like, like do my part and all that stuff. The whole like preparedness thing was something that I like looking back on later, I was like, man, like it's wild.
Yeah. Like,
But
maybe I should have like shot this once or twice.
yeah, but luckily, like once I got on the ground, like it's not like you fly, you land, you're like just like out in the wilderness, right? There's like bad guys everywhere. No, like, we flew into to Kandahar Airfield, right? This huge base, right, with like tens of thousands of people on it, right? And like there's time to adjust. You get in there, and then you do stuff like By the time I got out to my actual base, like yeah, I got to like zero my weapon and stuff, like make sure that it shot straight and that I knew what I was doing. So
Just the basic things, you want it
yeah,
to like
yeah.
trigger and work. All right, well, I definitely want to get to talking to some stories about your deployment, but going back to kind of how you said 9/11 was a very defining point in, I guess, our generation's life, was that for you the inspiration to go the military route?
Yeah, it was definitely like our family. When you look at all of the brothers and sisters, right? Like they were all in the military, active duty, right? And then grandparents, right, on the O'Keefe side, But yeah, so there was always this like big thing, in the O'Keefe family, right? Like of like the military, right? And like just how great it was, right? And like how great it was to like serve and like give back and like do all these things. Just a long history of service and stuff like in the military.
Yeah, I'm the oddball that like went askew and was like, oh, maybe not the military for me. I mean, who knows?
But yeah, so it was just kind of this thing that like we were like constantly exposed to. All of our parents, right, like on the O'Keefe side, like mostly served during like the Cold War, right, and like generally peacetime. Like my dad like went to Somalia during that whole thing, but we were like 5 years old, or I was five, when it happened. So I didn't really know what was going on. So there wasn't the whole like trauma, right, like of the war, right? Like it wasn't like super real that would have maybe like pushed people off of like the military.
Yeah. I mean,
So it
I
was all just
remember.
like very positive and stuff. But
Exactly, exactly. And I remember growing up as a kid being surrounded by the Coast Guard with my dad and it just seeming so cool. Like we got to see all the cool sides of it where my dad would
yeah,
bring you to the helicopter and to the simulator. And one time my dad when we lived in Alabama flew his helicopter to our school and landed on our soccer field for the whole school to see. I'm like, "Wow, this is badass." Like my dad's so cool.
yeah,
And so we
yeah.
see all these awesome parts of the military and how much of a family it is and the camaraderie. So it is very enticing, and there's so much of it that's really appealing that you'd want to be part of that.
Getting older and like looking back, there was never any pressure to do it either, which I think was big, right? Like
They were
um,
just brainwashing you. They knew.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Like but there was never anything like, my dad was never like, oh, like I really want you to like go in the military, right? It was like, hey, like do what you want. If that's what you want, then like great. But especially like as I got older and stuff, it was like, hey, this is like a pretty serious thing. So don't do it unless you're like totally sure.
Yeah. I think that's a good way as a parent to go about it too, because I know sometimes when my parents want me to do certain things and they're on my ass about it, I'm more apt to not want to do that just because they want me to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, now I'm not going to do it.
Well, you wanted me to? No, I don't want to further my education. It's dumb. Okay, so you kind of started to think about it more seriously, would you say, in high school?
I feel like I always knew that like I just like wanted to be in the military, right? Like it's just there was never really a whole lot of question about it. But yeah, it wasn't until like probably like late high school, that I really started thinking about like what I wanted to do in the military. Because at that point, right, like the wars had been going on for a couple years.
Yeah.
So that's when I started really like thinking about it like more seriously about like what my like career goals and like job and stuff were going to be.
You started thinking a lot about that in high school. Like, why did you feel that pressure? Like, oh, I need to make a decision now. Is it because of the nature of the military?
I knew I was gonna do like ROTC or like try to go to one of the service academies. Although like summer seminar at at one of them like definitely turned me off. I was like, I don't want to be like go to a military school for 4 years. Like I kind of want to like enjoy college.
I want to like smile and laugh and
Yeah, and like do stupid college things, right? Like party and
I want
like,
4 more years of being dumb for a little bit.
yeah, I want to have my own life, right? Like, but yeah, so like just need to make like that decision. Not that I'm like totally like I super like am obsessed with like the future or anything, but I did want to make sure I had some sort of plan of like what I wanted to do, so I knew like what steps I needed to take to get there.
It certainly helps to have that clear and confident decision that you know that that's the path you wanted to be on. But besides the military stuff, what else were you into in high school?
So just like all O'Keefe's, big into sports, right? Like
We were into them. I don't know how good we were.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like sports was like the big thing. It was like year round. It was like football in the fall, right? Lacrosse in the spring, and then it was like training for one of those two things in the winter and summer.
You grew up in Northern Virginia throughout your high school years, but
Yeah.
where were you living before?
So, yeah, so we spent like 6 years in Southern California from like when I was like 3 to 9, and then we spent a year in Boston, and then to Northern Virginia.
You did have a little bit of that military brat experience, moving around a little bit, but the place that you really felt like you were molded, grew up in, would you say was Northern Virginia?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that from like California that my sisters and I have like kind of just hung on to, like saying "dude" all the time to like literally everyone. But
That could also be a lacrosse thing if you're a...
it's true, yeah. But yeah, I mean, Northern Virginia definitely. If I were to call any place home, that would be it.
So what sports were you really focusing on in high school? Like what was really important to you?
So yeah, I played football and lacrosse, but lacrosse quickly became like my favorite sport, which I didn't even play lacrosse until high school. And then like it quickly became like my favorite thing to do. I was probably better at lacrosse than I was at football. Actually, I know I was like
I remember because when you guys were going through high school, we were living in Alabama, and I think we came up to visit you guys, and I must have been in 5th grade, so like not super young, but this is so embarrassing. I had never heard of lacrosse. I was like in my Alabama bubble under a rock, only focusing on soccer, and I remember visiting you guys, and you guys are talking about this like lacrosse sport. I'm like, what is this?
I don't think that we knew what it was until we moved to Northern Virginia. Like in California, it definitely was not a thing then. Like it is now, obviously. It's just exploded,
One of your injuries was you broke your nose and had to get a nose cast.
Yeah. I've broken my nose probably like 4 or 5 times though since then. It's like one of those things like it broke once, it just like kept breaking. Like
It's like my brain with every concussion I had.
yeah, exactly. Oh man, I have my own concussions things. In high school, I got one in a lacrosse game. And then I lied about like how bad it was. The trainer and the doctor was like, oh, like 2 weeks. But like after a week, I was like, I feel fine, right? Like O'Connell PVI was coming up.
Ooh, you gotta play in that.
Yeah, so I played the game before it. I took I played defense, right? I took a shot like right to the helmet. It was so bad. It was so bad. That's actually the only time like broken bones, like tearing muscles, like whatever. Like that's the only time I've actually like cried from an injury.
Wow.
It was like, yeah, it was that bad, and I was like, no, it's fine. Like,
like Patrick, you're crying. You never.
yeah, and then that's what my dad said too. He's like, that's when I knew it was bad, right? And we lost that game too.
It was for nothing. It was for nothing.
Yeah, and then I missed the PVI game anyway, so it didn't matter.
That sucks.
Yeah.
I remember my very last concussion, the one that ended my career as my senior year of college. I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad. And I remember going to the doctor a couple days later, and he's like, well, walk me through the play. What happened? And I was like so confident. I was like, yeah, this girl was dribbling down the sideline, and she crossed it in, and like I went up for a header and like collided here. And I was like, for sure that's what happened. Like I was convinced. And then the doctor believed me. He hadn't seen tape or anything. And then a couple days later, I was like, I'm just going to watch this for, like to remind myself of all the good times. And it was not even close to what I described. I was like, did I just make this up? Where did I even get this inspiration? But that was what was really scary to me. It was like, oh my God, that I fully thought that something else had happened.
Yeah.
And that was so scary.
Yeah. I injured my back pretty seriously junior year playing football. And then I re-injured it senior year, like right before our first game. Like we were warming up. I basically like missed the rest of the season, then was able to like rehab in time for lacrosse. So like at the time it sucked, you know, senior year and like all that stuff. But at the same time, because I think I liked lacrosse more, I didn't feel like I got too down about it. It was more like, okay, so I lost this one season, right? Like, how do I not lose another one? How do I get better for my senior lacrosse season?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like a big motivator.
Did you ever have dreams of playing in college?
So yeah, briefly, like I thought about playing lacrosse. There's one school that I kind of thought like, yeah, like maybe, but I had already decided, right, that like the military is where I really want to like focus.
You do all this rehab for your back to, you know, get back to playing lacrosse for your senior year. But at this point, you know that at least your athletic career will probably be done after high school. How did that make you feel?
It's definitely like kind of bummed when you realize that, like, hey, I'm not going to play anymore. But then also like I knew there was probably a club team where I was going, right? So I was like, hey, like I can still like mess around.
Yeah. And sometimes that's way more fun. Like looking back, like,
yeah.
the times I just play pickup and there's no pressure, I'm like, that is when I enjoy my sport the most.
Yeah. And I did actually play. So I played like the fall of my freshman year club lacrosse, like at ODU. But then I injured my knee there. It was like after like a day-long tournament we had, and I like got into the car and I couldn't like bend my knee like the right way. And I was like, that's not normal, right? So then that was a pretty easy decision to like, the military is the focus here. So while I enjoy playing lacrosse, it's not going to pay the bills, right? Like it's not a career for me. So it sucked, but it was ultimately pretty easy to just kind of let that go and just like not play anymore.
So once you get into college, you're like, all right, you're finally getting to live out this dream you've had of pursuing the military. You're starting on that path. What were your expectations of what it was going to be like? And did that play out?
God, it seems like it's so long ago.
Like, what is college? I can't remember.
Yeah, I definitely do remember that. Like, I always viewed college as just like a means to an end. I knew I wanted to be a military officer, and to be a military officer, right, I needed to have a college degree, and I needed to go through this program. It always seemed like it was pretty central to like everything I was doing, even to the extent of like, hey, like, do I want to go to this party, right? Like if the cops show up or something, right, and I'm underage, like I don't want to mess that up. So it drove like so many decisions, like even just like I feel like on a day-to-day level sometimes.
That sounds like a lot of the feelings I would have, especially towards the end of high school and in college with parties, and you're like, well, my focus is playing Division I sports, and you hear these horror stories of like these kids that got caught and they're in jail and they never got to do anything ever again.
They got arrested and they lost their scholarship. Now they're at McDonald's. Like,
like, does any of this actually happen, or did my parents just make this up to freak me out because it worked?
It was probably both.
Yeah, honestly.
A little bit of truth in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it worked, and it just like tainted my view of parties for life.
Yeah, you're a huge nerd too.
Smart. Like, it's not like I focus on school more. I just like hid in my room because I was scared of the parties.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ROTC was a big part of your college experience, but did you still have fun?
Yeah. So at ODU, the Army ROTC program there was so big. It was like 400 kids or something.
Wow. It's like your own fraternity, basically.
That's exactly what it was. Like, and there was like an ROTC house. So it wasn't like anything officially sanctioned, right? But like there was always parties there, and it was ROTC people parties, you know?
Yeah.
And that was where basically all my friends in college were in ROTC.
Yeah.
Because it was big enough that, right, like if you didn't like somebody, like you shouldn't hang out with them, you know, like, but there were enough people that, you know, like you got along with, so.
Yeah. It does sound a lot like either Greek life or even being as part of a sports team, which you probably, you know, missed being on a team sport, but you automatically were basically part of a new team sport, just that being ROTC. So yeah. I think a lot of value that people get from something like that is you go through all this tough shit together and you get closer because of that. Like, were there a lot of, you know, challenges even in college that you guys went through that you bonded over?
so not necessarily in college, but yeah, I mean, shared hardship is definitely like the biggest thing. Like that's how people like get the tightest, I think, in my opinion. But yeah, like you're 100% right. Like the same camaraderie that's in like sports teams and stuff, right? Like it's such a, that's what you really like miss the most. I feel like when you stop playing or like, stop doing something like that. So yeah, ROTC and then like the Army, obviously, like that camaraderie is definitely there, right? And the and the shared hardships are definitely like what builds teams.
Yeah, going back to like just being surrounded by that with my dad and the stories that we would hear from times where he's flying in storms and nearly dying with some guys, but these are now his brothers for life. And so that's another thing that was like always so inspiring to me. I'm like, damn, my dad's a hero. Never say it to his face, he'd kill me. All right, guys, be sure to head over to part 2 to hear about Patrick's very quick transition into the Army and how he was deployed overseas pretty soon after graduating college. And we can all relate on having tough first days on the job, but Patrick shares how he was thrown into a new job and day one turned into a pretty intense life or death situation. Be sure to check it out in part 2. Thanks, guys.